Hey everyone, welcome to Toast and Topics. We hope your February has been off to a great start so far.
Before getting into this week's episode, we're happy to share that both Ben and I went live with our first ever Toast and Topics Instagram Reel just over a week ago. As promised, we want to get the content in our podcast to you in new ways this year, and in particular, emphasize efficiency of information transfer. So we hope you liked it. While Ben and I aren't quite social media experts, we'd love to get your feedback on how these reels were to start off with and what we could do differently. We promise we'll get the hang of it eventually. So let us know what you think on Instagram, LinkedIn, or our email anytime.
That's right. With all that said, let's now get into the topic for this week, which is the recent advances made by the Chinese AI known as Deepseek. This has been a topic that has very much been on the minds of many people, both due to the unexpected nature of these advances as well as the impressive capabilities that this model has demonstrated. So we'll focus in this episode on unpacking what exactly we witnessed last week with respect to DeepSeek, what it could mean for the future of AI development globally, and possible economic impacts and responses from the US to it. So, with all that said, Sachin, do you want to first talk a bit about what has happened here?
Yeah, so on January 20th, Deepseek, which is a Chinese AI startup, garnered significant attention for its rapid advancements in its latest large language model known as the R1, which claims to be a more cost-effective and efficient AI model than many of the American models that have been brought to market. Within days of its release, DeepSeek's chatbot was the most downloaded app on the App Store. And the news of DeepSeek sparked an immediate reaction in the US, with some of America's largest tech giants shedding billions of dollars in market cap in just a single day. And there's a few reasons why we've taken notice of DeepSeek. The first is cost. DeepSeek claims to have developed its R1 model for less than $6 million, dollars, which is over 21 times cheaper than the most comparable AI models in the US. And this low cost development threatens the business model of many US tech companies that have invested billions in AI already. The second is the fact that an advanced and effective AI model was developed despite restrictions of key exports from the US, such as semiconductors, which are considered essential for developing these models. DeepSeek has demonstrated that cutting edge AI development is possible without access to the most advanced US technology. And finally, DeepSeek's platform is open source, which throws a large wrench in the revenue model of most US AI companies, which charge hefty monthly fees for its services. So it was really quite a remarkable moment in the global race for AI development. In fact, tech investor Mark Andreessen called it AI's Sputnik moment, comparing it to the Soviet Union space race breakthrough in the 1950s.
That's a great overview, Sachin, and definitely a compelling quote from Andreessen. What I find interesting in all of this is the contrast that we've seen between the approach that DeepSeek took in training its model as compared to what we are seeing from American AI giants such as OpenAI. For years, the American investor community has really been told that vast sums of money and computing power, or compute in AI jargon, are needed to stay at the forefront of artificial intelligence, which has really led to a widespread belief that the best AI really requires spending quite a bit. This is one of the reasons why the American government recently pledged to support the $500 billion Stargate project as announced by President Trump. Yet DeepSeek has partially debunked this, and it's done so by proving that it can develop a model that is just as effective as many of those of the American AI giants at really only a fraction of the cost. And this calls into question the need for companies to spend so much on AI capex. And just as a perspective here, by the third quarter of 2024, the American technology industry as a whole had spent nearly $170 billion dollars on AI related capex, representing 56% year over year growth. And there is also massive projected future spending. Forecasts indicate that by 2025, capital expenditures by leading technology firms could reach $200 billion, dollars, driven by escalating demand for generative AI applications.
Wow, that's pretty remarkable. To me, it's also pretty surprising to see the rise of DeepSeek. And I think for most people listening to this episode, it was catching us off guard in many ways. So just for some background on DeepSeek, it's a company that's based in Hangzhou, China, and it's a spinout of the Chinese hedge fund known as Highflyer. And they've been in the AI world for some time now, with their first model released in November of 2023. And it provided multiple services, including a web interface, mobile app, and API access. The thing that's notable is that DeepSeek uses a different approach to train its latest R1 model versus what's used by OpenAI, which involves less time, fewer AI accelerators, and less cost to develop.
Yep, that's all absolutely right. And so I think that it would be helpful here just to explain why exactly R1 is so much cheaper than what's currently on the market, at least on the American side. The affordability of DeepSeek's R1 model is really attributed to its efficient development approach, which emphasizes optimization strategies that reduce computational requirements without really compromising performance. And this efficiency enables DeepSeek to offer its AI services at a fraction of the cost of its American competitors, making advanced AI more accessible to a much broader audience. Without going into too much technical detail here, just given our lack of experience in the tech world, there are a few things that DeepSeek's model does differently than that of OpenAI's. The first key thing to emphasize is that DeepSeek employs a quote unquote mixture of experts system. This splits DeepSeek's models into submodels, each of which specializes in a specific task or data type. Essentially, if you think of an AI model like a librarian, the standard American models are trained by reading every single book in the library, memorizing the key details, and being able to relay that information to the end user when asked about it. This model is both expensive and time consuming because it's really read every book in the library. DeepSeek's model, on the other hand, has one librarian that has not really read even a single book in the library, but it's able to rely on other librarians who have knowledge of different books to extract the necessary information that they have in order to get an answer. And using this mixture of experts technique, DeepSeek's model essentially delegates questions to a roster of experts, i.e., the different models, to answer such questions rather than having to know everything itself. And that requires less time and power in order to actually come up with a pretty compelling answer. And just to put some numbers behind this, while DeepSeek's model has over 670 billion different parameters, only 37 billion are actually activated for any given token or query that you could throw DeepSeek's way. The other two techniques that I'll highlight are quote unquote inference time computing scale and also mixed precision framework. Inference time compute scale is essentially a dial within DeepSeek's models that ramps allocated compute up or down to match the complexity of an assigned task. For simple tasks, DeepSeek's model will use as little compute as possible, and it will only ramp up should the query be somewhat more complex. And then mixed precision framework, just as a concept, refers to the fact that DeepSeek has trained parts of its model with less precise 8-bit numbers, using only 32 bits for harder calculations where accuracy matters more. And again, that allows for faster training with less compute, and in the end, that makes for a much cheaper model.
That's really interesting. So if I had to summarize, essentially, DeepSeek has optimized the ability to extract accurate information at a fraction of cost and time to get that answer, which is quite impressive. But however impressive DeepSeek's performance might be, I also think it's worth underscoring that there is a bit of skepticism as well around some of these achievements. First, there's a belief that DeepSeek has relied on a process known as distillation. And distillation is a process where a large, complex model transfers its knowledge to a smaller, more efficient model while still retaining performance. It's somewhat analogous to a teacher transferring knowledge to a student. And this technique is particularly useful in making powerful AI models more accessible by reducing the computational costs while still preserving their capabilities, like we've discussed. And in that vein, OpenAI has claimed that DeepSeek has been using the OpenAI platform to pull significant amounts of data on which to train its model, which basically allows DeepSeek to bypass the more than $100 million that OpenAI incurred to first train its GPT-4 model. Second, as mentioned earlier, many people are wondering how DeepSeek actually developed their models in spite of export restrictions on American chips to China. And to that point, it's also possible that DeepSeek has been smuggling a significant number of chips from other countries. For example, the industry analyst firm Semi-Analysis reports that the company behind DeepSeek incurred $1.6 billion in hardware costs and has a fleet of 50,000 NVIDIA Hopper GPUs. And that finding undermines the idea that DeepSeek reinvented AI training and inference with dramatically lower investment than the leaders of the AI industry. More than that, DeepSeek's parent company, Highflyer, has reportedly spent $500 million alone on the technologies associated with DeepSeek. Sure, DeepSeek's training costs may have been only $6 million, but this figure refers only to a portion of the total cost to get its final output. It also doesn't account for research, model refinement, and data processing, as well as overall infrastructure expenses. So, all of this is to say that while DeepSeek's model is impressive, there will be more information to come to give us a more complete understanding of how impressive it really is.
That's really interesting. So, just for the sake of argument, let's assume that DeepSeek's achievements are, in fact, as impressive as the initial reporting about them has appeared. I think that raises a ton of very important questions about the economic and national security implications of artificial intelligence down the line. On the economic side, of course, the stock market saw a significant downturn the day after DeepSeek's achievements became widely recognized, especially for NVIDIA, which is the supplier of many of the graphics processing units or GPUs that are used to train AI models, with the rationale being for this that much of the money being invested in high-end semiconductors to train AI systems may actually not be necessary if cheaply trained AI models like DeepSeek are really the way forward. And I think there are just a couple of points to be thinking about on that score. The first is this concept called Jevons paradox. Essentially, Jevons paradox is that if you get more efficient at using a thing, you actually may still wind up using more of it. Why? In the AI context, if you can train better AI models with fewer semiconductors, you get greater efficiency in training and more for less, and that effectively lowers the cost of AI models. But lower prices may mean higher demand for the services that AI models provide, and then ultimately even higher demand for the semiconductors that are being used to train these models. Of course, it remains to be seen whether this paradox is actually going to hold in the AI context, but I think it's a powerful reason to expect that demand for semiconductors will ultimately remain sky high, as Jevons paradox has applied in many other industries that have become more efficient. For example, the coal and power industry in the 1800s, which is how the paradox was first developed. Indeed, actually, the broader and potentially more impactful consideration of all of this is that if low cost, high performance AI models like DeepSeek are the way forward, that really does mean that AI is going to be much, much cheaper than it is currently. And that's only going to make it easier for AI and the services AI can provide to diffuse throughout society and really transform our economy.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that some of the more interesting implications of DeepSeek's advance are actually political as well. Deepseek has shown that despite American export controls on semiconductors, China can still generate really world-leading large language models, and it can do so extremely cheaply as well. And I think that there's a number of questions that policymakers need to be asking themselves right now. The first is, are export controls truly effective? I think it's right to say that for many other Chinese AI companies, America's efforts to restrict China's access to cutting edge chips have stunted their development. But it seems that in the case of DeepSeek, the restrictions actually prompted them to innovate. More broadly, one has to wonder how often it may be that sanctions on China could backfire by simply encouraging the country and companies in the country to innovate its way around any vulnerabilities that it might have. The second question I'd be asking is, can we really stop the diffusion of AI capabilities? If China was able to train DeepSeek with relative ease, then the lead that American companies have certainly had in AI model development may actually be a narrower one than we thought. Instead of the technology requiring huge amounts of expertise and hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to develop, it may instead be replicable by small teams with only a few $1 million in funding. So advanced AI capabilities could thus become available to many foreign governments and militaries, and that could undermine the lead that the US currently has. So, I think it's clear that the competition regarding semiconductors being used to train these models are going to remain in focus, especially as demand for AI across a broad suite of applications increases. But it seems very likely that the chip war between the US and China is going to continue with this backdrop.
Yeah, those are all great points, Sachin. DeepSeek really does have fascinating implications for both economic and geopolitical competition. So I can't wait to see where all of this leads over the coming months and years.
Yeah, that's for sure. We live in very interesting times, and there's no doubt we'll be returning to this in another episode at some point soon.
Yeah, that's right. Well, to our audience, thank you all for joining us this week, and we'll see you next week for our next episode, which is going to focus on something a little different than usual, eggs. Specifically, we're going to be talking about bird flu, supply chains in the U.S. farming industry, and why it's gotten so hard for you to cook a balanced breakfast these days. So we'll see you all then.
Thanks for listening to Toast and Topics. Before signing off, we wanted to disclose that the views in this podcast are our own and are not reflective of any institutions that we're associated with. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and share with a friend or family member. We'll see you again next time.